Well, that's the characteristic of so many, like Isaiah, as we talked about earlier. Here he is having this wonderful spiritual experience, seeing the Lord on his throne, and it's fear that hits his heart. Woe is me, I'm unworthy for it. And yet he's forgiven and redeemed, and yes, the hand of judgment is there, but it's also a hand of redemption. Now, we've talked about the destruction of Assyria and how this comes in the middle of his ministry, and part of this scattering of Israel that begins in the day of Isaiah continues some 120 years later when a prophet in Jerusalem by the name of Lehi is told to leave, not to be forcibly taken out and scattered like the Assyrians did with the northern tribes, but here was one to leave, and he was warned to leave because otherwise they would experience the destruction of the Babylonians and another scattering that would take place to Babylon and elsewhere. What do we learn here in chapter 10 about the scattering of Israel?
Yeah. You know, not only the scattering of Israel, we learn in chapter 20 that Assyria is a tool that God uses to punish the apostate covenant people. But then he also makes it clear that Assyria is not going to recognize God's hand, and they too will be punished. I love the imagery of verse 15. Yeah. He asks them, "Shall the axe boast itself against him that heweth therewith?" Mm-hmm. You need to remember that you need to recognize God's hands in all things, and even if he uses you as a tool to punish an apostate people, if you likewise are wicked, there'll be punishment for you. Yeah. Which would have been a remarkable thing to say in his setting, because in his setting, in their day, the common idea was that there were lots of gods and every people had their own god, but this witness is no, Jehovah is the God of not only Israel but also Assyria, and later we'll see of Babylon when we get to chapter 23 and 24.
Yeah. Right. And I think there are several things to learn from that as well. I mean, one, it's so easy when we do something well to think that we did it and to congratulate ourselves, and this is a nice little reminder. The Lord is the one who really makes you capable. But another lesson is that we see in the Book of Mormon several times the wicked being punished by the wicked, and bad things happening to those who are wicked. And sometimes it's tempting to say, well, the Lord condones that wickedness that brought about the wickedness. Here the Lord is very clear. Yes, the king of Assyria will be a tool in my hand and he'll bring about those bad things, but he's not clean either, and he will receive his own punishment.
Good point. Now, we're kind of on like a little roller coaster here where there's bad news, good news, bad news, good news. Let's turn to some of the most classic good news we have in all of these Isaiah chapters. One of my favorite ones is here in chapter 21, Isaiah 11 as it is. This chapter is, of course, quoted in Isaiah. We find it here in the Book of Mormon. It's mentioned specifically in the Pearl of Great Price as one of the particular chapters or scriptures used by Moroni to instruct the young prophet Joseph, and it's the subject matter of a question-answer section of the Doctrine and Covenants. It's in all the standard works. In a quick nutshell summary, what's the message of chapter 21?
It's really continuing the same idea. You trust in Jehovah, and you trust in the Lord, and here's the deliverer. And so we have the first part of it's the idea, I'm going to raise up a deliverer, the stem of Jesse, who is Christ. If you read the chapter heading there, and DNC 117, it makes it very clear too. This 113. Is 113. Thank you. This is the Savior.
That's the stem of Jesse.
Yeah,
and
he's going
has
to come
a branch out of his roots, some servants. There's a root in verse 10. He's going to have people he's going to work through, but he's behind the scene bringing about this redemption.
And ushering in the millennial era that he described in such beautiful language.
And where no more envy and adversary arose between Ephraim and Judah, which was exactly happening in the days of Isaiah. Ephraim was the antagonist against Judah, but they're in harmony and peace. There's gathering instead of... I mean, what a contrast from these things that Isaiah is experiencing.
And Isaiah keeps using this contrasting superlative imagery. So he's in the past, and we could have read some just recently where he talks about that which you would think would be good, such as beauty, being turned into something terrible, burning or a stink. And here he uses that which you'd think would be normal, and he's going to change it to a superlative good. The wolf will dwell with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the kid, and the calf and the young lion, and fatling together, and a little child shall lead them. So he gives us these stark contrasts. When you break the covenant, things are worse than you would ever guess. but when you keep the covenant, they'll be better than you could ever
Yeah, in fact,
imagine.
he just kind of has opened the curtain and given us a little view into paradise and the millennium and all of that.
Latter-day Saints really like this because after giving the view of the millennium, he talks about events that have to take place before
that, leading up to the millennium.
And he has this wonderful description of the latter-day restoration of the gospel through the Gentiles, through this ensign that's raised up amongst the Gentiles, who then gathers Israel and Judah.
Through missionary work and all. And then the wonderful psalm of praise and thanksgiving in in chapter 22. This is my wife's favorite chapter of Isaiah. And I tease her and say it's because it's the shortest one. But it is. It's beautiful, poetic imagery here of both praise and thanks. And those are two of the primary motifs of the whole book of Psalms. They're expressions of prayer and understanding and appreciation. And these are beautiful, beautiful little songs here.
Apparently that will be sung by the people that dwell with the millennial Messiah. I wish he gave us the music. I don't know if these have been
Well,
sung.
maybe somebody out there will compose some
Verse
good
2,
music.
Lord
with it.
Jehovah is my strength and my song. Doesn't that sound like
my strength and my song.
we've got that line in a
One
hymn,
line
but
anyway.
not the whole song.
All right, quickly here, the last two chapters that we need to highlight here are 23 and 24, dealing with the king of Babylon and the fall of Babylon. And we alluded to this in an earlier session, how for Israel to be free, she has to leave Babylon. And Babylon will fall. And you mentioned how the wicked will destroy the wicked. We see examples of this here. And so there is hope for Israel, just like the book of Revelation tells us. It's terrible, it's rough, this is a dreadful day, but don't worry, Babylon will fall. Well, Terry, what have we learned from these Isaiah chapters here?
I think anciently the message was, don't fear Assyria, don't fear Babylon, don't fear Syria or Israel. Trust in Jehovah. He can be your deliverer. And we learn so much about the deliverer as both the mortal and millennial Messiah. I think what Nephi wants us to do in this dispensation is to say, okay, when we face our Assyrias, our Babylons, our, later will be Egypt's or Syria or any of our enemies, if we'll look to the Lord and His deliverance, we can escape them, no matter what they are.
And there will be signs so that you'll know that this deliverance is coming. I'll send servants. Yea, verily, these wicked nations, they will fall. Paradise, the millennium, God's kingdom will come. Well, those were good messages of Isaiah. I think it's very appropriate that Nephi uses them because his people would be struggled with it, but we get it now from a double source, two witnesses, and there's some of these passages that there are significant changes in the Book of Mormon from the King James text, so they merit our study, and I hope we can encourage all to make a worthwhile experience and delight in the words of Isaiah. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Thank you.